Welcome to Playing with Fire, the podcast for people who are ready to custom build their love.
We're talking about non-monogamy, however you design it, as an individuation opportunity.
Want to leave the default and make your life spectacularly you? You're in the right place. We're going to talk about something today that has been on my mind for many years, that also was requested by a listener. And I know that this matters to you too, but maybe only more recently, because it has to do with labels.
Oh, yeah. I went through a lot of time deciding that I would avoid labels and just let everything be, well, unlabeled.
Right. So we're going to talk about how do you describe yourself to someone? How do we convey what we're talking about when we say we're doing something different in relationships? Like when you say you're married, people make a bunch of assumptions about what that means.
Yeah, I was going to say people know what that means. No, people think they know what it means.
Yeah, there's the thing. It is the implicit assumptions and expectations. Yep. Like there is a cultural container called marriage that is not, marriage is not a monolith, not at all. I mean, you and I are married. It doesn't look like a lot of our friends' marriages.
It doesn't look like it did a year ago.
We're a little dynamic, but when we're trying to describe our relationship to other people, having labels is pretty important. I mean, language is the technology of relationship. Language is the technology of communication, and communication requires, at least as I understand it, someone to be conveying some type of information and someone to be receiving it. And so the question was put to me, well, how do I help people understand that this is my orientation? Is this an orientation? Wait, I don't know. Is it an orientation? That's how I try to describe it. And I was glad that a listener wrote in about this, and I was glad to hear this question because sometimes I forget how long we wrestled with it. And then when I was doing a dissertation that specifically, I was speaking to polyamorous people who identified as non-monogamous or polyamorous specifically. We had to figure out how to talk about their relationships and how to label their relationships, because one of the things I needed to do was be able to document and describe how they identified their relationships. I needed to be able to do that.
There's that communication again.
Exactly. And that, in this case, in the dissertation sense, I got the book out. In the dissertation, it was a move I had to make to figure out, how do I help people convey to the reader what the relationship is that they have? If it's not just marriage, marriage as in, well, let's just all pretend that we know exactly what marriage is and it's a monolith. What do we do? And I got the dissertation out because I remembered how many different terms came up when I asked people to describe their relationship style. But let's start with you.
Okay, let's start with me. I always like to talk about me, and I've come to really appreciate labels.
So that's why I wanted to ask you. You were so anti-label when you and I first started getting into a relationship that for a while I called you Gonzo.
Yeah.
I called you Gonzo. I called you my Gonzo because you eschewed all labels. You didn't want to be called boyfriend. You didn't want, which I get, like gender fluidity stuff notwithstanding, at the time, you were identifying as a man, and yet boyfriend didn't work for you. And then I realized that also none of the other labels seemed to work for you.
So
and this caused some trouble for me.
Well, I was committed to not being pinned down. I mean, this is a completely different conversation, but I was just fair. I didn't want to be held to whatever your imagination of a particular label meant. I wanted to be able to do whatever I wanted and be whatever I wanted and act however I wanted. That didn't go all that well, but
I think there's something really valuable there, though, because choosing a label, it doesn't have to lock you in forever.
Which I had problems with that all over the place. I wouldn't commit to my favorite color
Right.
Because I thought it was too big a commitment.
Right. As though someone
was going to come back later and say, no, but you
you
said.
picked purple. You can't change it. What is your favorite color today?
Actually purple. Now that you mention it.
I guessed right.
You did.
Do you know what mine is?
It's been like a teal green. Where are you now?
Right now I'm full on navy blue.
Right, navy blue.
I am so into navy blue, which is freaking me out because blue was my mother's favorite color. And you didn't double up on those things when I was growing up. Like my grandmother's favorite color was yellow. My Aunt Debbie's favorite color is green. Still is. I'm not allowed to have green as my favorite color because it's hers. My mother's favorite color was blue, so I couldn't have that. That's a weird rule. I don't know what that was all about. Okay,
but back to the idea of you get to change your mind.
You get to change your mind. So whatever I ask you to label yourself as, I'm going to restate this over and over again the whole time we're together. You can always update me. If I mislabel you, please feel free to say, that label doesn't fit.
Right.
It's just uncomfortable. Please don't use that.
I've gotten more comfortable with the idea of that with my awareness of my gender fluidity. It's like, oh, yeah, because it doesn't stay the same. The way I want to present myself doesn't stay the same day to day.
Your presentation doesn't stay the same. It really doesn't. I mean, some days you'll wear skirts and some days you wear pants and some days you look quite over onto the mask side and some way over onto the femme side. And the thing I've gotten used to is it changes all the time. And that's just your presentation, let alone how you identify.
Mm-hmm.
So how are you describing your relational style, as it were, these days?
My relational style, very much a poly orientation, polyam orientation. It comes right up out of me. I don't think about it. It's just how I experience the world.
How you experience being
how I experience being in relationship with people that you're, as the person that I'm relating to right now, your relationships with other people affect me only. Well, they're not your responsibility how they affect me. That's just, I don't think about that. It just is for me.
Okay. So orientation is one of the ways. And actually that's what the listener put to me, like, do I call this an orientation? What is it? And this conversation has been had in so many rooms that I'm in, sometimes privately, but also when I was training to be a sex educator, we would have this conversation over and over again. It seemed like it kept coming up because nobody was quite sure how to describe it. And then I did this research, and some of the words that people use to describe their non-monogamy were included as a choice, as a philosophy, as a mindset, as an orientation, and as an identity.
Okay.
Since then I've been working with this a lot, and I've landed on a three-part, a triptych. And I ask people this question. I ask them, hey, when I'm going out on a date, do you approach your non-monogamy? Do you approach it from an orientation standpoint or a philosophy standpoint or as a choice? And that has helped me understand others really, really well. And it's also helped me when I'm working with clients. It helps me understand like where they're coming to their relationship process from. Mm-hmm. Now, I've heard this sometimes people talk about their relationship structures, their relationship styles. When I was training to be a sex educator, Raz Deshava was calling it love styles. Like, what's your love style? I don't mind any of these terms. I think they're all useful. But the thing that I really do find super helpful is the difference between somebody who's approaching their non-monogamy or their polyamory. They're approaching it like when they learned the words for non-monogamy, when they learned the language of polyamory, when they found like, oh my goodness, that's just a match. Like that is a full match for how I am. This is just who I am. There was for me, and I've heard you describe something similar. this sense of being seen. Like the label is like, oh, that's just how I am. And for folks who that's true of, it can just feel so euphoric to settle into, like, right, polyamory or polyamorous or non-monogamous. Like, it's how I'm oriented. It's how I meet the world.
And so there's my experiences. So there's this part of me that I may have been holding kind of close or cloaking or whatever. It's like, oh, someone will name it and see it. That feels amazing.
Right. And so using the language of orientation helped me also normalize for myself that while I wasn't yet feeling fully reflected or mirrored, I didn't feel like the world understood me. When I could say, hey, I get that you don't understand why I'm in love with multiple people, but here's how I meet the world. When I would present that to people as an orientation, I found that many people who maybe didn't understand it from a felt sense, from an inside sense, they were like, oh, okay, so that's coming right up out of you, that this is just a truth. This is just, you're just sharing your truth with me. Cool. So I was able to find shared ground, and that helped me settle into then being able to explore, okay, now how do I want to inhabit that? How do I want to live this reality?
Right. Now we have another issue at hand.
Right. Because there are other people in the world. I don't know whether you've noticed. Now, there are other
Recently,
people.
It's come to my attention.
There are other people in the world. And so how I meet the world has a lot to do with what kind of relationships are even possible for me. Now, it became very obvious very quickly that not everyone in the non-monogamy world is coming to it from an orientation sort of approach. And when I was researching, and even now while I'm doing research interviews, there's another theme that comes out. There are people who learned about non-monogamy. They learned about it. Maybe they were introduced because a friend was non-monogamous. Maybe they picked up a book. Maybe they listened to a podcast and they were like, oh, that there are words for that. Mm-hmm. And they start listening to the basic principles of it, like radical honesty or centering consent and custom designing relationships that work for people. They start hearing these things and they're like, yeah, you know what? That's philosophically, that is aligned for me. That makes sense to me. So even though I don't feel this like love for multiple people just like brewing up and overflowing and like this natural, oh, I am this way, I align with it. Right. They just do. And so those people described to me how they then learned about what worked for them in this world in this way of relating, and then they took it up as a philosophy. And so for a long time, I thought that you were actually just philosophically aligned with non-monogamy because you would describe it in such a logical, rational, positivist way.
Yeah, I mean, it's how I approached everything. Yeah, so it was a very sort of, well, everything, the way I talked was always philosophical because it would be like at one remove to my feelings and my
philosophical.
Oh, yes, very definitely.
But continue.
But it was at a remove from my me. Like, I'm not saying that I'm polyamorous or that I would like to have lots of relationships, but here's what I see, I think. And
so give an example, because you have a wonderful example of going to Disney World and not want to, and like looking at marriage.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. I haven't thought of that in a little while. This was on my honeymoon in my first marriage, and we went down to Disney World and we were standing in line. I don't know why the context matters so much, but it's such a clear memory.
Well, it's visceral. So
yeah, it's very visceral. And we're just standing in line waiting. And for one thing, there's nothing to do. Just standing there waiting in the hot. And so, we were talking about marriage, and we said, well, we don't want to just be married people. We don't want that to be who we are.
I mean,
and then we proceeded to be married people for, quite a long time. But
I knew this story before there was anything about you and I being anything other than sort of friends.
I mean, it was sort of a claiming of like iconoclasty. Like, I don't want to be traditional or
right. So there's the thing. I remember hearing this story, I think through the grapevine, and then later from you and from your first wife, and hearing about it. And it sounded like a philosophy, like their philosophy of relationship is like different. It's not married.
Yeah.
Like, we're married on paper, but it's somehow different from what you imagine marriage to be, which is pretty cool in that I hear you empowering yourself to define your relationship as you want, but I see you smiling.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, I say a lot of I means. Apparently, I don't want to just say the things. So I hear you describe that, and I think, oh, yes, we defined our relationship as what it was not. Oh, there's a lot of room to just do whatever in that. There's a lot of room to not get together and talk about what it is.
This happens,
which is a very different conversation.
Right. This happens all the time. In my consultation room, I see people all the time who are like, well, I know what I don't want. They can start to name some of their needs by naming what they don't want to have anymore. Either and that might be positive or negative. It might be, I don't want to not have this anymore, or I don't want to have this anymore. But it's all about not having.
Yeah.
Because claiming what they actually want hurts, because then they have to reckon with the fact that they don't have it.
Yes. Yep.
So I'm hearing that there was a level of philosophy, like a, you know what, it would be better for us to not just follow the path we see everybody following. Right. Let's do something else.
So I still feel the orientation going all the way back to when I was a little kid, but it was also supported by philosophy. It was so I could lean on that when I wanted to have those kinds of discussions, which is mostly what I did.
But then you didn't take the next step, which is to take the philosophy and make your choices about how you live your life.
No, I didn't do that.
So the third way, the third approach to non-monogamy that I see frequently, and actually I see this one all the time, it's people who maybe don't have language for it, but they might be described as ambiamorous. They would be content in either a monogamous or a non-monogamous situation, or they're at least willing to contemplate and try out an experiment in that in-between space. And so they see their relationship style as a choice, like just a choice. And it might be that they see it as a choice that they make, like, okay, I'm going to choose, and this is going to be my choice for the long term. Or they might think about it as a choice, like, I'm going to wake up every day and I'm going to do what makes sense. I'm going to choose to either remain monogamous or remain non-monogamous based on what is right for me and my life. So just to summarize, then we've got the type of polyamory or non-monogamy that brews up from within, and I think of as an orientation. You're oriented toward this, whether you act on it, whether you choose to act on it, or whether you have the privilege to act on it or not. Because let's not overlook the fact that if there are 5% of people, recent studies, 5% of people are living non-monogamously, 20% have tried it at some time. But let's just remember that means that this is the non-normative, which means in order to practice it and in order to be out about practicing it, there is privilege.
Because you have to have a level of security in
a sense of safety or willingness to be up against something.
And not everybody's in a spot.
Right. So okay. So even if we just take a cursory look, we've got this orientation that, like, I may feel this as the natural setting of what it is to be me. I may also feel philosophically in alignment with the basic premises of non-monogamy. And then there's still the question of, I might also just decide, I might choose to act non-monogamously or monogamously, depending on the way that my life works and what makes sense. And in this way, I see a whole lot of problems start. This trifecta, right? These three different approaches, I see problems start because a lot of people come to me just presuming that the way that they have approached non-monogamy is the way that other people are too.
Oh, sure. Okay.
In fact, I hear a lot of conversations. So many people who, when they feel the recognition of, oh, this is just a way I might be. I think I am polyamorous, right? It's like coming out of the closet all of a sudden. And this definitely happened for me because I had been out of the closet as queer for a long time. And then all of a sudden I had a word for this thing that I had been aware of my whole life. I had fallen in love with multiple people my entire life since I was a little kid. And I just assumed that that's because I was screwed up. I thought that was just because I was like, something was fundamentally broken and wrong about me. So when I found out that that was just a way some people were, I felt too. I felt this like deep sigh, a physiological relaxation. But it wasn't until I learned that there were people out there collaboratively, like making like building a philosophy of various types of non-monogamies. That's when I went from, okay, at least now there's a way for me to describe myself to, oh, there are other people I can align myself with, other places where I could go and find people who, even if they don't feel this coming up from within, they have also chosen to be down with with conscious, clear relationships that aren't based solely on exclusivity and longevity. Monogamy tends to be based solely on exclusivity and longevity of relationships. And that just, it broke everything open. And from there, I got to make choices. But I said I saw problems, and I just want to say the problems I see are when people who are choosing, like they're like, okay, I could do this. Sure, let's be non-monogamous. If it doesn't come from within, if it is not this deeply felt truth, then they may feel a lot of flexibility in like, well, I could live this way or not. I don't feel particularly ostracized. I don't feel like I need, like, whatever. This is just a thing I do when it makes sense for me. And so their perspective, their way of feeling that in the world may be so profoundly different that they don't understand other people who are like, are you kidding me? This is earth-shattering. And when I'm not able to be out about it, I feel like closeted and icky. And this causes a very an almost tragic misunderstanding between people.
Yeah, the word that I was thinking was miscommunication, because one of the things you said is that, oh, I have a word for this. It is so related. I mean, that's kind of what this whole episode is about, is the language of relationship. Because I have a word for this thing now that I've had this experience with for so long. And all of a sudden there you have access to, it's not just that you can talk to other people. And this is my experience. It's not just that I'm saying, oh, so let me tell you what this is like for me. And here are some words that have started to make it into the, stories and culture. And so you might have heard of them and we'll talk about it, but also for using the words for myself to say, oh, by the way, this other part of me, here's what's going on right now. And language for me internally to myself is of pretty strong value.
Okay, so you're tapping into something important here. If we think about that group of internal figures who make up you, right? If we think about, so from an internal family systems perspective, this is like the parts of you who have a lot of agency, a lot of autonomy. They're different.
Yeah, they want different things. They take different actions.
Yeah. So this helps you help them communicate with each other.
Yeah.
So I have an example. Can I use you as an example here?
Of course.
You and I talk all the time. It was making me think about, you have described this little boy who lives in you, this inner child figure.
I love him, but he causes so much trouble.
He causes trouble.
So much trouble.
So that little guy, he's sweet and curious, but you've talked about this part of you that also just does not want there to be rules, is incredibly reactive, and has as soon as there's a label on something, he will do the opposite. As soon as, even if your mature, centered, grown-up self is like, I have chosen to do this.
It's probably happening right now. There's probably something that I have forgotten to do because that little guy is like, no. Anyway, yeah.
So a little reactance from that little guy, right? Yeah. He's like, is he like 5 or 7?
Yeah, no, I think he's like 5.
Okay. So that part, right? What does he think about your labels around love?
He wants nothing to do with them.
Why?
Because they constrain him in ways that he doesn't want to be constrained. Like, nope, don't pin me down. I will just do whatever I want to do. I will figure this out and just do it. And everybody else can, and here's the socially awkward thing, and everybody else can just bloody well figure it out by watching me.
So that part of you.
Also pay attention to me.
But I've seen you out in the world, in a space. I have seen you being hit on. And I'm like, oh, his little boy is up. He's not going to have any idea.
Great at noticing that, because
you won't necessarily notice. And if that particular part of you is loud, is out front, right? He doesn't identify as being polyamorous. He doesn't identify as having a high capacity for wanting to like create conscious relationships and stuff.
No, he identifies as a chipmunk who lives in a rock wall, basically.
Yeah. And he's adorable. And he's not a part of you who really can collaboratively create relationships.
No, not that guy.
So this languaging around relationships is one way for you to reparent him.
Yeah.
Because you still get to be in connection and communication to this part of you. But what do you do when he just keeps rejecting and pushing back?
Yeah, I'm still working on that, honestly. I generally try to just apply will. Like, nope, I'm going to do this other thing. I have like techniques.
Vegetarian parenting.
Just as well as you can imagine, right?
I mean, how well does it work with the 7 children you've raised?
It doesn't work. It doesn't work. It produces results, but it does not reach toward any goals that I have. Yeah.
It produces results, but does not meet your goals.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
predictable results too.
One of the ways that I have played with that part of you, because you and I do parts work and complex work and what I call inner counsel work all the time. One of the ways that I've played with that part of you is to, when I see that you have this childlike energy, ask you a bunch of questions, because he does really like to be paid attention.
He loves attention. I just realized there is something that I have started doing with him. I give him something to do.
Oh, well, that's nice of you.
I know what he likes, so I try to find things that he will like to do them. Like
puzzles and things?
Yeah, puzzles, games, to just sit and look at the ground for a while. You know, like so little kid turning over rocks and things like that. I make space for him.
He is.
Yeah.
So I didn't know we were going to get into like inner counsel work during this conversation, but I think whenever we talk about issues of identity, who am I? It is important to me to draw attention to the fact that we are multiple. it is, and I am shocked by how frequently I have this conversation, and I am met with people who are like, if I'm multiple, isn't something wrong with me? The answer is no. No, nothing's wrong with you. We are not monolithic. And so another way that this matters around relationship style and identification is you may have parts who are in opposition. They are not in alignment yet. So, I have a client right now who is working really hard to get these different aspects of themselves to agree, because from one week to the next, they're making decisions that drive their life forward.
You have a husband right now who has those issues.
Right? So you have decisions that drive your life forward. But if one week that little Kenny is making decisions, and the next week your inner scientist is making decisions, do you go on different dates? Like, do you even like
those are very different experiences for me and everyone around me.
So this is one of the ways that it becomes very, very challenging as we're navigating transitioning relationships paradigms. And then we're trying to figure out how to make ourselves intelligible to the people we're in close relationship with. And then we're in the context of a community that may not have any understanding or framework to understand what we're talking about when we say we're not monogamous. And then we're inconsistent. And we're inconsistent from a very genuine place, like such a sweet and honest way of, I genuinely, like right now, I feel in full alignment. I feel all of my parts are in agreement with my decisions and the philosophy of, and this orientation that I've discovered. We're all good. Great. And I move forward in time 15 minutes, and any one part of me may be like, nope, that's not safe.
It's not working.
That feels dangerous. That feels risky. I don't want to do that. And now the decisions we just made. So I did you and I we could sit down, we could do a monthly relationship check-in, make some decisions, and then I could have a part come up and just be like, oh hell no.
No, hell no, yeah.
None of that works for me.
So I'm noticing.
And so all the orientation, philosophy, choice thing is kind of thrown out because my orientation, I may still identify with my orientation is polyamorous. Cool. You good with me going out on a date? No.
Nope.
Because we are complicated.
Because we are complicated. Messy. And this is, so when we started this conversation and you're like, what's your favorite color? Purple. Which part? Which part likes purple? And it was so hard for me early on because I thought of myself as a monolith. I am one person, one single person. And I couldn't commit to any one thing because I knew I was an inconsistent person, because I didn't want to say, I want this thing now. Here's a menu. I want that meal. Oh.
By the time it comes, you don't.
Now I want another meal. Oh, you know what? I want both meals. Believing that I was a monolith made me feel like I was crazy because I couldn't hold on to one point of view for 10 minutes.
Because the point of that imagination, it is a fantasy. The idea that we are a unified whole is a fantasy. It is not, like, psychologically speaking, that is a fantasy. We are far too complex for that. And it's not, this doesn't come just from like childhood trauma or anything. We are multiple.
I think it comes from having a memory. I mean, I couldn't be a monolith without not ever remembering anything, because the minute I remember my past, I remember a different point of view that is mine. And like, oh.
And man. So now, if you're negotiating a relationship and really taking into account that I am multiple, you are multiple, and now my relationship constellations, right? They start to get polycules, start to get real interesting because we're all multiple. But still, the language of, so rather than say, okay, polyamory is definitely an orientation, I'm going to say it's it's absolutely up to you to define what your identity is, and help you make that clear to other people. It can help to contextualize it. So whenever I'm trying to describe something to someone, if I can contextualize it a little bit, it helps a ton. So I can say, well, I feel clear that I am oriented toward, I am capable of loving multiple people at a time. And philosophically, right now, I am feeling like I really want to dive into the depths with one or maybe two people. And I don't know that I philosophically feel really committed to living out my full orientation right now. Like just having that level, allowing myself to feel into what it is that I want to create. I mean, I feel the same thing about my queerness. The question of who I'm attracted to is so personal and so individual that it really isn't. I mean, I have this identity of queerness, and the reason I say queer is because I'm like, not one thing.
Yeah, that's why I use the word queer too. It's like, yeah, not simple.
Right. And so I guess this is an invitation to stay in the in-between. And at the same time, I'd love to hear how people apply this idea of just how are you approaching non-monogamy? Are you approaching it from an orientation perspective? Are you approaching it from a philosophical perspective? Or are you approaching it from a choice perspective? Because right there lies a really important conversation. I have sat in rooms with people who absolutely understood non-monogamy to be a choice for everyone. And I will say, yeah, your behavior is always a choice. Sure. But I don't want to go back to the 1950s where, being attracted to someone of the same gender might have been my orientation, and I was supposed to choose not to feel that way and to hide it. Like I can't even imagine. I luckily did not have to grow up that level of closeted, and this is the tension that I see come up when you imagine that relational style is just as much a choice as, like it's just purely choice. It's just a behavioral decision. It's
behavior driven.
Yeah. Then you may be distinctly ostracizing and even harming someone for whom this is coming right up from within them. And at the same time, just because my orientation is to love multiply did not make it all right for me to force my first husband to get on board. I have so much respect for him for knowing that that wasn't the right choice for him and for leaving. Yeah. It was clarity. I don't like the way we split. It was far more damaging than it needed to be. We did not have any of the tools we should have had. But having that clarity was important because it would not have been right for me to foist my need for this, my need to live this truth onto him either. And so, in fact, the best thing that possibly could have happened would have been an elegant ending. We did not have an elegant ending. And in part, that happened because he thought he could hit me with the club of what you're doing is wrong. He never said my queerness was wrong, but he really hated this idea of polyamory, especially when I came at it from an orientation perspective. And he just wanted me to put it away. He wanted me, and it wasn't that he wanted me not to talk about it. He wanted me not to feel that way. And that's when I knew that we couldn't be together, because I could choose my behavior. I could. It was going to hurt. It was definitely going to hurt, but I offered to. But when he said that I needed to choose not to feel that way, it broke me. It broke a part of me. I knew that he was never going to be able to see all of me. I knew that we were going to start growing further and further apart because I was going to have to pretend that this reality was not my reality. Not, okay, I'm choosing to behave monogamously because we have made this monogamous commitment, but
But the request not to feel something is the request to be somebody you aren't.
Exactly.
And
so we ended brutally. It was awful. And I think that the elegant ending was actually, it was right there. If we had understood that what we'd come up against was, I had found an accurate description of my orientation to the world, and so had he. And the elegant ending would have been to say, wow, then our love story has come to a whole new chapter. Can we still love each other? Okay, in what way?
mm-hmm.
What do we want to do together? We want to co-parent? Do we want to be best friends? Do we want to still live together? What do we want to do? We might have reimagined this in all sorts of ways, and we didn't. And that was primarily due to lack of imagination. I mean, this is 13 and a half years ago now, so hindsight's 2020, but if I had had even just the language of, oh, he thinks this is a choice. So for him, this feels like I am choosing to hurt him.
Right.
And I was feeling like he was choosing not to see me and thus hurting me.
Wow.
We were doomed from that moment.
And like you said, you didn't have the tools to end elegantly. And some of those tools are just that language, that your ability to see that you saw things differently by being able to say how you saw it. So you've described these three approaches. You approach it as an orientation, or a philosophy, or a choice. And those are the beginnings of a conversation.
Right. I don't think they're mutually exclusive.
Yeah. When you ask me for my favorites, and I'm like, oh, I don't want to commit to the conversation about it. That's what you're doing. It's like, it's an orientation. What about philosophy? What about choice? Now you start a conversation that gets you, a relationship.
Yeah.
You ask me those questions, I ask them back. We learn about each other, and we discover where we align and where we don't.
Right. And so the table that's open in my dissertation, I was coding these interviews, and there were 37 instances of what was coded as wrestling with the nature of polyamory. Like wrestling with, is this a choice? Is this an orientation? What do I do? Is it an identity? How do I make sense of this? I really believe that the conversation and how people talked about it in these interviews, when the conversation was one of curiosity and, oh, this is a way we are different, then it's an invitation into differentiation. And differentiation is where the potential for psychological individuation, those are two different things. Differentiation and individuation are not the same thing. But when we can recognize that you are different from me, that differentiation opens up space for then me to realize that I am multiple, and I may not be fully, totally aligned internally. And that allows me to bring my unconscious junk into conscious awareness rather than projecting it onto you.
Right. Yeah.
And so this is where it becomes a truly psychological experience to just explore what non-monogamy or the questions of non-monogamy have for you.
Those conversations, what you were just saying about differentiation and individuation, they so resonate, because I have conversations with you all the time. It's wonderful. I get to talk to you all the time. And I talk to you and I realize that we don't agree. We don't see things the same way.
Yeah.
And two things happen. I discover that I am not you. There's the differentiation.
Yay.
Which honestly is something I struggle with. I still struggle with enmeshment that I've learned through my life. So I'm trying to learn how to not be you and not ask you to be me. But at the same time that I learn that I'm not you, I learn that I am me. I look inside and see, oh, the way I know we're different is I know something about me. And there's the individuation. I start to develop who I am.
You have the capacity then. Right. And so, okay, I'm going to read that quote then.
Oh, good.
I've read this quote a couple times in the last 24 hours. Sometimes I come across a quote in the course of my work that I'm like, oh, this one just needs to be said a bunch. And I keep hearing people use differentiation and individuation as if the two terms are interchangeable. And from a depth psychological perspective, they aren't. Differentiation is highly beneficial. I encourage everyone to be able to tell the difference between I and thou. That's great. But let me give you this quote from Jung. It's from Collected Works 7, paragraph 269. He said, the aim of individuation is nothing less than to divest the self of the false wrappings of the persona on the one hand, and the suggestive power of primordial images on the other. What he's talking about there is individuation as a process of sorting out and discarding pieces of persona that do not fit you. Realigning yourself so that persona is not all you are, and also divesting, separating from, getting space from the archetypal images that are threaded throughout all of our experience, our cultural awareness. Humans are exposed to these archetypal patterns, and then we identify with them.
So we start identifying with one of those archetypal images.
So you identify with the trickster, with Loki,
yes,
or Hermes, right?
Yeah.
And when you were younger, I watched you identify with them as a real asshole.
That's accurate.
You would go to other people's houses and you would open their cupboards and look at stuff, and you'd turn upside down. You were just a jerk. You would do whatever you felt like doing anywhere you wanted to. You were completely identified with the archetypal image.
Yeah.
There was no space between you and that.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
But later, I came to see you start to notice your trickster-like nature as a feature and not who you are. Like, you had started doing those things, I'm sure, very young, but then they became part of your personality, what you thought of as your personality, but they're not. You had intermixed them so deeply into yourself that you weren't even doing them for a reason. And the reason, the way I'm using you as an example here, because that one in particular you were caught in the pattern. You were caught in the pattern, the archetypal pattern, to a degree that was no longer serving you, and you were just doing it out of habit. You were not conscious of it. You would come over to my house when we were just friends. You would come over and you would, just like open cupboards and stuff. It was like you thought it was your character trait. And then I watched you grow up some, and you started embodying trickster energy when you felt like playing. And you started noticing that it was not you aren't it.
So I started to separate myself from that image of the trickster.
Yeah.
And it became
what we can get separate from, we can heal. What we can create a little space from, right? So once I can view it, I can choose now, how do I interact with this aspect of me, this aspect of humanity? Okay, we didn't call the podcast non-monogamy and individuation. Like, that is the subtitle of this podcast. I mean it. Like, I got my doctorate in depth psychology knowing that it was going to make me an outlier, knowing that it was going to mean that I didn't make sense to everyone. But if this made sense to you, I'm really glad that we're in each other's sphere. And I welcome further questions on this. More and more people have been taking me up on this. Please do email questions. You can email me directly at joli@jolihamilton.com. And just email me questions, or Ken.
A lot of what we talked about today has been about conversations. Yeah. Please join the conversation.
And if you have a question that is about relationships and you're not sure how to even ask it, I want you to trust that this is what I do all day long. I talk about relationships from a depth psychological perspective. It doesn't have to make perfect sense. Trust that the conversation that needs to happen will happen. So this was really fun.
Thanks for a great conversation.
There is an upcoming salon There's a salon called Open Relationships for Smart People, how to open up without screwing everything up and burning it all to the ground. I would love to see people show up for that. If you are considering opening, or if you know anybody who is, or if you're just dying to know how people do this relationship stuff with more care, join us. It's an hour-long conversation. You're welcome to ask questions directly at the end. I will talk about the program, the Year of Opening, in it as well, so that you can understand how I work with people in groups. But mostly I'm going to talk about the 5 pillars that I really believe need to be at the base of all conscious relationships. So join us. You can find more out about that on my website, jolihamilton.com. There's no one right way to design your relationship. And lots of people, actually about 25%, according to a recent national survey, are interested in some type of open relationship. But how do you know if you are ready to open up happily? Not everyone is, and that's no problem. I've got a 60-second quiz that will give you the answer. And even better, you'll walk away with your next step, whether you're good to go or not so much when it comes to opening up. And this is no BuzzFeed nonsense. I personally designed this quiz from my years of academic research. Go to joliquiz.com. That's JOLIQUIZ.com, and find out if you're ready to open up happily and what to do if you are or if you're not.